You described in detail the liberation and how he was taken out of Germany and how he was stuck outside of Germany. It's, again, urge all our readers to purchase the book and read because that's a fascinating story in its own right. Now he comes back to Germany. What is his mission post-war initially in Germany?
Right. So this is sort of a dramatic story, and I won't go into it in detail right now, but he's not liberated by the Americans at Dachau. He's whisked away from Dachau with all these special prisoners into the Alps of northern Austria and Italy. And it's there that he is rescued first by the German army because he had been whisked away by the SS, and the German army is in Italy fighting the Italians and the Americans. And the German army was not itself fully Nazified. And so they found these special prisoners and they liberated them from the SS. And then when the Americans arrived, they liberated the special prisoners from the German army. So Niemoller is now in the hands of the Americans, which is a good thing. He's flown to Naples, Italy, where he's held for a fairly long period of time. He leaves Dachau in late April, and he doesn't get reunited with his family until late June. And so during this period, he is kind of furious that he has spent 8 years in a concentration camp. He's considered, one of the more famous German resistors, and yet the Americans are not treating him with the respect I think he thought that he deserved. At any rate, the concentration camp experience did not change Niemoller as drastically as you might think. He still maintained some of his nationalist outlook. And when he's interviewed after his experience in the concentration camps by some Americans in Naples, he voiced some opinions that people found pretty offensive. A continued sort of nationalist German outlook. He said that he didn't think Germans would feel responsible for the Nazi era or for the concentration camps. He blamed everything on the Nazis as if this was not a German problem, but just a Nazi problem. That interview was a bit of a scandal. And afterwards, he received a lot of criticism, and he received a lot of visits from American Protestants, from Karl Barth, from a Dutch Protestant who was prominent in the World Council of Churches. And they all kind of coached him a little bit, explaining, we need you to be the voice of repentance. We need you to be the German model for coming to terms with the Nazi past. And they encouraged him to think that only he could do this because he had spent 8 years in a concentration camp. And so if he were to come out acknowledging his guilt and his responsibility for Nazism, that it would be a model for other Germans to confess their guilt, responsibility, and so forth. And so he has this sort of turnaround during this period where he begins to realize that he has an important role to play in the rebirth of Germany after Nazism. And one of the things that he does is he helps to draft the famous Stuttgart Declaration of Guilt from October 1945. And the Stuttgart Declaration of Guilt is important because the church, it's written by church leaders, Niemoller, the most important of them. They acknowledge the suffering that Germany has caused on other countries in Europe. They confess their guilt, and no other major institution is doing this, just the German Protestant Church. Most of the other institutions were crushed by the Nazis. There are no political parties. There are no trade unions. So people are looking to the German Protestant Church for direction, and they come out with this declaration of guilt. And it was a really sort of shocking moment. A lot of Germans were irate about this because they felt that admitting to the guilt of the German people and the guilt of the church was going to result in a harsher occupation policy by the victors. On the other hand, it was really important because the churches of Europe and the American Protestant churches were very much relieved that Niemoller confessed the guilt of the Protestant church and of himself personally, because it then allowed them to reestablish a relationship with German Protestantism.